What's up guys, Matt here, MKS Performance. Today we're doing the reinstallation of the intake and exhaust valves for the 2 litre TFSI and the 2.9 VR6. It presents us a good opportunity here to discuss the differences between hydraulics from a roller type to a bucket type and how all modern engines will now use what's known as a zero valve clearance design, where the hydraulics will maintain a zero valve clearance between the cam roller and the actual working face of a bucket, which is here. This is a typical hydraulic bucket design. The old 1820 valves and the VR6s have these, and they're kind of been phased out because with a bucket design you're limited to the amount of valve lift, or i.e. an aggressive valve lift on the camshafts, because a high lift camshaft will have typically a very steep progression on the lift, and that will it gets to a point where if you make it too steep to increase that lift, it starts to dig into the valve buckets, so that becomes a problem. So this is where they've come away with making a roller design. So a roller design that will just rotate on the camshaft, and you can have a steeper valve angle as you like and it won't affect it, because these are no longer hydraulic buckets, these are just rollers. Again, they use hydraulics, so it's a zero valve clearances. So what we're going to show you right now, typically what happens when you remove the camshaft from a cylinder head that has hydraulics fitted. The hydraulics will become jacked up, which means that when you then don't notice and you put the camshafts back in and torque the cam bridge down on this, you have a jacked valve, and what will happen is the valve will never fully shut properly, and the piston will just slap it and it'll bend it. Worst case scenario, it just kisses it and damages the valve. Worst case scenario, it snaps the valve head off and it ingests it and writes the engine off. So what we're going to show you is the difference of what we've done is all 15 valves I've serviced, and I've left the last one to show you the difference. So if we look here, see how the hydraulic can move up and down? Now if we go to the other one, it's jacked, because this is what happens. The non-return valve, the little ball bearing in there with the spring, basically sucks up a crap load of air, and it mixes, and it doesn't allow that hydraulics to compensate. And this is obviously, as the camshaft spinning around, the hydraulics will maintain a zero valve clearance. So gone are the days where the old engines, you have, like motorbikes, you have to do your valve clearances like every 5,000 miles. Engine has to be bone cold, stick a feeler gauge in and find out your clearances. The gone are the days of this. But again, hydraulics will limit the RPM of an engine. If you want a very fast, high revving engine, you typically don't have hydraulics, you have solid lifters. So, but we'll get into that another day. So what we're going to show you is how to overhaul these. So again, soft is good, jacked is bad. Let's see how that's not compressing, so we'll remove that. Okay, now I've got just a little locking pin. You get these for pressure washers and stuff like that. Very, very good tool. So what we'll show you is there's a little clasp. You have one closest to my index finger and the other one on this side. Okay, now in order to remove these, just gently push the back clasp off with a fingernail. Okay, and there we go, that's it removed. Okay, now what we're going to do now, see the hole there? We'll get this needle, we'll stick it inside and we'll find the ball bearing, and I'll get a wee rag. There's an oil feed hole that we're going to bleed this out of. So we push the needle onto the ball valve, and then you see all that oil coming out? Now the valve, or the hydraulic, is free to move up and down. That's Nova, our dog. Don't mind, I don't have a squeaky ball obsession. Oh, what are you doing?
Nova, you're not the star of the show.
Right, so if you do this once or twice in the inverted position, kind of cant it back on itself, got all that oil out. Once we're happy enough, that all the oil is out, the hydraulic should be free to move up and down, which we can see it's doing here now. Okay, so that's working fine. So we now need to reinstate it into the roller. Now it only fits one way, so you have like this long clasp here. It's difficult to make out in the oil. That one faces the roller. The opposite one, which has a little notch either side of it, faces out. It'll become obvious once I reinstate it. So there is play in these little clasps, so have it all the way out. Here's your roller. That's the hat for it. Just pull that back and it clips back into place like that. You can see these little retaining arms for that clasp, holds it in place. Just make sure it's in good and center. They're not structural, they're just there to hold it together while it's being inserted into the head. They've got no structural strength at all. But as we can see, that is now working properly. We now put that back into the head. And that's all 16 valves serviced. We've recently used the valve stem compressor, the pneumatic one. We've just finished up reinstalling that. There's all pressure tested perfectly. So now what we're going to show you is a bit old school. So you have these are your buckets here. So your bucket, the way that works is that will sit on top for the camshaft to rotate along. So it's a very, very hard metal. So the camshaft's moving along and that's pushing up and down. What maintains the zero valve clearance is again hydraulics. Now these are a little bit different from the 2-litre TFSIs. These ones are a bit of a fucker to take apart. The only way you can take these apart is that it's actually got a little snout ring. You can't really see it, but it's just there. You see where my thumbnail is, my right thumbnail? There's a little snout ring in there and that retains it inside the bucket in here. The only way you can get these out is to invert it, a piece of plastic or something soft, and bang down quite bravely. Your knuckles will get sore, but thank God there's only 12 of them and not 24. So that's how you get that out. Right, to business. To bleed the air out, I've lost my... There we go. This is the working side that will meet the valve stem head, the head of the valve stem, should I say. So that's the working area. So you can just about make inside there. There's a little ball. Again, this is your non-return valve. So what we need to do is grab our pin and we're going to depress that. Push the valve in and it will allow, you can hear that squeaky? With that valve being pressed in, it allows us to compress the hydraulics and drain the oil out of there. And you'll know when it's all out because you'll be able to fully compress it. So it should be able to bottom out onto the upper section of that hydraulic. Okay. I think there's a little bit more oil in there to come out. So once we're happy with that, all the oil is out. See how that's functioning quite nice and soft. These will be jacked when you remove the camshafts from a hydraulic bucket style valve actuator. So they'll become jacked. So they'll be jacked in that position right there, which means that you've got a valve that won't fully close. So now we've got working as it should. Now to put it back in, just a little bit of oil on the side there, and this little snout ring will retain that in place. You just line it up and use your thumbs. Don't use a vise, don't use a hammer. They don't take much effort if you've got thumbs like mine. And that's working perfectly. And that's number 3. As we can see, we put all the hydraulics back where they come from. It's good practice. You don't necessarily have to, but